Chapter 1, A Long Day's Glow. If you had stood on the headland above Glenrath Bay in the summer of 1994, you might have thought the world ended there, at the edge of Scotland where the sea gnaws the cliffs like a patient sculptor. Purple scallops of heather quilted the hills, a patchwork only the wind could read, and a single-track road curled down toward a harbour no larger than a child's cradle. That afternoon the air smelled of salt and iron and peat smoke, the perfume of places most maps forget, but the 19-year-old who stepped off the rickety bus inhaled it as though he'd discovered the scent of possibility itself. Aidan Byrne shifted his leather satchel from one shoulder to the other, squinting against the sunlight that poured in long golden planks over the rooftops of Glenrath. Fresh out of his first year at King's College London, he had come north to measure, sketch, and write about forgotten medieval arch bridges, a summer project that promised a modest grant and an excuse to escape the suffocating buzz of the city. His advisor had warned him the Highlands were pretty but lonely, yet nothing about this hush felt lonely to him, only vast, unclaimed, and humming with stories. He found the only guesthouse easily, a slate-roofed croft with green shutters and a sign that read MacLeod Rooms, Vacancies Welcome. When he knocked, the door flew open before his knuckles touched wood, revealing a woman whose auburn hair tumbled in curls that refused any braid's discipline. She wore an apron dusted in flour and a smile that belonged inside a poem rather than an inn's threshold. "You must be Mr. Byrne," she said, accent lilting like gull-wing dips. "Ma'am saw your letter." "I'm Isla." She offered a hand, warm as newly baked bread. "Aidan," he managed, acutely aware of the journey sweat on his palm. "Thank you for having me." Isla MacLeod ushered him into a hallway fragrant with yeast and lavender polish. Somewhere deeper in the house a kettle clicked to a boil, and an elderly voice sang a Gaelic lullaby under its breath. Isla paused by a cloak rack, studying him with curious sincerity. "You've come to draw our wee bridge, then?" she asked. He nodded. "And a few others up the coast. But yours is the first, and rumoured to be the prettiest." She laughed softly. "Och, every stone here thinks itself the prettiest. You'll have your hands full arguing the lot into your notebook." The conversation might have ended politely there, sealed with the formalities travellers trade like stamped visas. Instead, Isla tilted her head toward the kitchen. "I was just taking bannocks from the range. You'll be wanting tea before you tramp out again." Aidan tried to remember the sophisticated deflections Londoners used when time pressed, but the hunger in his stomach voted against city manners. Tea would be wonderful. And so it happened that the first bridge he examined in Glenrath was not built of granite at all but of shared sentences. Over tea that tasted of oranges and mild seaweed, a local blend, Isla said, he learned that she was 18, that her older brother had vanished into the merchant navy 2 years before, and that since her father's heart attack she helped her mother run the guesthouse and mind the little shop beside it. She sighed when she spoke of the shop, as though chores kept her stitched to ground she sometimes wished to outsoar. Isla, for her part, learned that Aidan could not roll an R without sounding like a sparrow choking on breadcrumbs, that he carried pencils sharpened to microsurgical points, and that the photograph tucked inside his satchel showed a curly-haired boy of 10 waving beside a gravestone, his twin brother, Owen, lost to leukemia 8 years earlier. He spoke of Owen with a matter-of-factness too calm for grief yet too intimate for mere memory. Isla thought, here is someone whose quiet has depth, not hollowness. She resolved, quite without formal decision, to help him find every arch his grant required and perhaps a few more he didn't know he needed. By the time Aidan unpacked in the dormer loft, wood-framed window gazing directly toward the sea, the sun had swung low over the water, flattening itself into a crimson circle like a coin melting on a forge. He brought his sketchbook to the harbour to capture the bridge before dusk collapsed its details, but halfway there he spotted Isla kneeling beside a copper pot in the lane, coaxing sloshing milk into butter with a metal paddle. The sight should have been ordinary, yet something in the vigor of her rhythm and the concentration crinkling her brow anchored his attention. He realized he wanted that image drawn before any moss-bearded arch. "May I?" he asked, lifting the book. She looked up, cheeks blotched pink from the chill breeze. "If you sketch me ugly I'll tell ma'am to double your rent." "Impossible," he said, before he could soften the truth into gentleness. Her lashes flickered, startled, then she resumed paddling, but a beam of amusement crossed her eyes like sun through clouds. Aiden sketched swiftly, lines racing the dimming light. A lock of Isla's hair escaped its ribbon and tapped her cheek. He penciled it in as though the curl itself authored the page. When he finished, he turned the sketch toward her. She leaned over the pot, butter scent rising between them, and stared in silence. The drawing wasn't perfect, her jaw angled too sharp, her shoulders minutely uneven, but the likeness captured a fierceness of focus that photographs usually drowned. Isla touched the paper with a thumb flecked in cream. "It's me," she breathed, as if verifying her own existence. "But it's also more than me. You drew how it feels in my head when I'm working." Nobody had ever told Aiden that before. "You drew how it feels." The words nested in him, warm, cueing a shiver he disguised beneath a cough. "Come," she said suddenly, wiping hands on her apron. "The bridge will sulk if you ignore it at sunset." They hurried down a switchback path. The Glenrath Bridge revealed itself in full only at the final bend, a single, perfect arch carved of honey-colored sandstone that had darkened where centuries of tides lapped its base. Barnacles glittered like tiny constellations along the waterline. Above, carved into the keystone, a weathered inscription declared Doka's hope. The archway reflected on the inlet's glassy surface, forming a circle so unbroken that Aiden felt he could step into it and emerge inside the water as easily as passing beneath. He set up his sketch block, but Isla lingered behind him, arms folded. She watched the way he measured angles with a pencil held at arm's length, watched how his brow knitted in arithmetic she neither understood nor wished to. To her this bridge was a cradle of local legend, sweethearts tied ribbon wishes to its parapet, fishermen tossed the first mackerel of the season below the arch to pacify sea spirits. You did not measure that sort of thing, you believed it or you missed it. Yet as the tide crept, Aiden's drawing conjured the geometry into tenderness. Perspective lines bent like lullabies. He shaded the arch's underside until it glowed with dusk-furnished gold. The resulting picture held both myth and mathematics in a handshake. Isla caught herself biting her lip at the raw focus painted on his face. He broke from the work abruptly. "Do you swim here?" "Often," she said. "The kelp's slippery as sin, but the water hums against your ribs as if it's plugging you into something older than skin." Aiden liked the phrase, repeated it. "Plugging you into something older than skin." He looked down at his ink-dark fingertips. "That's what drawing feels like sometimes." A thread of quiet stretched between them, not awkward but taut with possibility. Over it drifted the distant toll of the church bell marking 8. Isla blinked. "Ma'am will have supper on the table. If we hurry we can still steal the crustiest parts of the pie." They climbed back, steps illuminated by the last pink embers flickering across moorland. At the top, Isla stopped, breathless. Glenrath's cottages jutted against the sky in jagged silhouettes. Smoke from peat fires angled upward like prayers uncertain of destination. She pulled a ribbon from her pocket, sea green, fraying, knotted it to a post beside the path, whispered something he couldn't hear. When she turned, her eyes were glassy but not wet. She gestured for him to keep walking. Supper at the McLeod table was a riot of warmth. Mrs. McLeod, cheeks as round as the moon pie she served, insisted on hearing the entire itinerary of Aiden's project, nodding at each bridge name as though they were distant cousins arriving for Hogmanay. "You'll be needing packed lunches," she declared, already calculating jelly jar counts. Aiden tried to protest, he could fend for himself, but Isla's grin warned him such protests rarely survived this house. He surrendered gladly. After mince antadis and an apple crumble that made his tongue believe in miracles, Aiden carried plates to the scullery while Isla washed. Steam curled around them, thick with lemon soap. He dried, she rinsed, and their elbows brushed in the cramped space, creating sparks neither dared name. "You'll want morning light on the keystone inscription," she advised, stacking bowls. "Tomorrow's tide turns low at 6:10. I can wake you." "I'd like that," he said, voice unsteady from the electricity of proximity. She lifted an eyebrow. "You'll like the waking or the bridge?" Both, he answered, truth undressed of ambiguity. The dishes clinked in approval. Later, alone in the loft, Aiden lay awake as moonlit waves slapped the harbor wall in arrhythmic applause. He replayed the day like frames of a silent picture show, Isla's freckles catching sun, her ribbon swaying on the post, the word hope chiseled above water that never stopped hungering for stone. He realized he had captured only one sketch of the bridge but four of Isla, each from a different accidental vantage. The drawings unsettled him, too intimate, too quick on the page, as though his pencil bypassed permission. Yet he tucked them carefully between protective sheets. Sleep held off, courteous but insistent, until eventually he surrendered. In the dream that found him, Owen stood on the bridge's parapet tossing stones into the circle of reflected arch. Each splash birthed a ring that radiated outward, overlapping, widening, never dying. When Aiden awoke shortly before dawn, he knew only this: whatever drove him to chase forgotten bridges had tonight braided itself with whatever held Isla to this coastline, and the braid was stronger than either strand alone. He dressed quietly, heart unaccountably fast, and padded down creaking stairs toward the scent of early coffee already brewing. Through the kitchen window he could see first light igniting the heather like violet fire. He also saw Isla in the yard, arms raised, twirling beneath that newborn gold as if thanking the morning herself. He paused on the threshold, unwilling to disturb the dance, and understood, with the clarity that accompanies dawn and revelation, that Glenrath would never again be merely a dot on a surveyor's map. It had become the axis on which his future tilted, unpredictable as the wind that now lifted Isla's hair into wild flares around her head. Some axes bind, some axes break. He did not yet know which kind awaited him here on the edge of the world where the heather swayed, but he thought he could hear it turning, slow and inevitable, beneath both their feet. Chapter 2, A Geography of Letters. The morning after Aiden's arrival unfurled like parchment beneath a quill. Low tide bared the muddy ribs of Glenrath Bay, and gulls marched about as if inspecting the exposed secrets of the sea. Isla rapped twice on the loft door at 5:45, not the timid tap of courtesy but the brisk summons of someone who knew dawn was a living thing and would not pause for sleepers. When Aiden stepped into the yard, the light hit him like a benediction. A soft northeast breeze varied the chill of open ocean, yet Isla's grin was the kind that provoked warmth in marrow. She handed him a flask of coffee and a paper bag whose grease spots betrayed fresh scones inside. Then, with a conspiratorial nod toward the still dark windows of her mother's room, she produced from her apron pocket a tarnished key. "Library," she whispered. "What library?" "Exactly." She spun the key by its ring. "A cupboard of forgotten books kept in the church loft. The minister lets me borrow anything so long as it finds its way back before Sunday sermons. Thought a scholar like you might require provisions as essential as bannocks." Aiden's surprise widened into wonder. "Lead on." "One step, 2 letters." The Church of St. Bride squatted at the village edge, whitewashed and weather-battered. Inside, the nave smelled of candle wax, cold stone, and something older, perhaps generations of whispered vows. Isla directed him up a spiral stair to a cramped gallery. A single lancet window cast a blade of dusty gold across crates laden with hymnals, shipping manifests, and leather-bound histories. "Look at them," she said, opening a wooden chest whose brass clasp squealed. "Books abandoned by time the way fishermen abandoned net weights once the lines snap." Aiden crouched. His fingertips brushed spines mottled by mildew, each title a half-erased dialect of the past, Proceedings of the Society of Antiquaries of Scotland, 1891. Journal of Tidal Phenomena, Western Seaboard. Sal Nam Bard, Songs of the Bards. He grinned. "I could live here." "You can't. I've already claimed squatters' rights." They laughed softly, mindful of echo. While Isla selected an anthology of local folklore, for cultural research, she insisted, Aiden unearthed a battered leather folder stamped with a faded thistle. Inside lay maps, ink-scribed sheets showing coastal bridges no modern ordnance survey had bothered to update. Margins bloomed with meticulous marginalia, tide heights, stone sources, who carved which crest. The unknown cartographer's hand was firm but lyrical, dates ranging from 1883 to 1906. "This is cartographic gold," he whispered. "Good," Isla said, "because Glenrath Bridge isn't the only one worth your graphite. I've a mission for us, if you're willing. Trace that folder's route before summer shears itself shorter." His heart hammered. "Us? There are inlets only a local can navigate. Let me be your guide." He nodded before Prudence could intervene. The folder slid into his satchel beside spare pencils and the scone bag, a treasure chest intermingling ink, pastry, and possibility. Mileage of the heart. Over the next 3 weeks they traveled north and south along the ragged coast, sometimes on the battered McLeod lorry, more often on foot, once on bicycles borrowed from a holidaying cousin. They mapped each bridge the Thistle folder named, Culfian, with its twin arches like knuckles bruised by centuries, St. Ronan's Leap, spanning a gorge so narrow that locals claimed the saint once jumped the gap while devils nipped at his heels, Benaki Span, a moss-draped relic whose keystone bore a laughing salmon. Every expedition followed a ritual. Aidan measured and sketched, Isla recounted the legends, then they picnicked, sharing oatcakes and jokes, before tying a ribbon, Isla's habit now adopted by Aidan, somewhere discreet. He chose colors at random, but he soon learned, picked hues with intent: crimson for courage at the gorge, silver for memory near a graveyard, sea blue for solace above a cove where a shipwreck lay rotting beneath kelp. In the evenings Aidan expanded rough field drawings into precise elevations. He worked at the dining room table while Mrs. McLeod hummed airs of the Isles and kneaded dough. Isla sat opposite transcribing his measurements into tidy columns. Occasionally their knees touched under the tabletop, an accidental graze sending tremors through his core. They talked, too, about futures, about fears kept folded like letters in unknown pockets. Aidan confessed his scholarship barely paid rent in London and that his father wanted him to study civil engineering, something that builds profit, not just bridges. Isla admitted she sometimes felt the village walls tightening around her like a tourniquet. "Do you ever wish you'd been born somewhere larger?" she asked one night when the rain drummed the roof hard enough to rattle glasses. "Sometimes," he said, sipping tea, "but large places can feel emptier than small ones. It's not the acreage, it's whether someone matters to you there." The silence that followed was soft as wool. Neither dared label the obvious. The language between pages. On the morning of July 15, a telegram from King's College arrived. "Need progress update, stop funding release pending stop deadline August 1st. The blunt rhythm of bureaucracy jolted Aidan. He'd documented only 10 of the 18 bridges listed, sketches were half-inked, measurements incomplete. London suddenly felt like the moon. Distant, demanding, able to pull tides despite being far away. He spread maps across the kitchen floor, frustration beating in his temples. Isla crouched beside him, the hem of her sundress pooling like spilled paint. "You can finish," she said, "if we're clever and quick." "Quick slaughters accuracy," he muttered, "and the Grant board slaughters sloppy work." She tapped the cartographer's notes. "Look, 6 of the remaining bridges cluster near Ardnare. If we camp there 3 nights, you could document them all." He exhaled, eternally grateful for her pragmatic optimism. "I'll owe you ox cartloads of favors." "You already do," she teased, "but I accept installments in scone form." Postcards in practice. Ardnare lay 40 miles north. They left at dawn, Mrs. McLeod waving from the doorstep, promising to forward any urgent mail. The borrowed bicycles groaned up hills but flew on descents, and by noon they crossed the tidal causeway to Ardnare's sand-ringed peninsula, cud-chewing Highland cows observing like serene customs officers. They pitched a canvas tent on a bluff above the main beach. That night, waves sang to the pebbles, and the Milky Way revealed itself as the bridge of heaven, one no engineer could replicate. Aidan, lying beside Isla on a blanket, traced constellations with an outstretched finger. "That one," she said, "is seen na drocade, the bridge head. My gran taught me, says souls use it to cross into dreams." Aidan watched the luminous arc. "Think we'll meet there someday?" "Maybe," she whispered. "But let's build what we can here first." Her hand found his. The contact felt inevitable, like a half-drawn breath finally released. They turned toward each other, starlight gilding cheekbones, and kissed, slowly, shyly, yet with the certainty of something long agreed upon by their hearts beforehand. The kiss contained salt and scone crumbs and all the unsent letters between them. It rewired his understanding of gravity. The earth pivoted not on its axis but around the space where their lips met. Ink as compass. The following days blurred into an exquisite fatigue. They hiked marsh trails, waded streams, balanced on parapets to read weathered inscriptions. In the evenings they documented by firelight. Isla's lettering grew cramped, Aiden's shading blurred as the pencil dulled. They joked that the tent smelled of graphite and rain more than canvas. On the second afternoon, Isla nicked her ankle on a barnacle while photographing keystone carvings for him. Blood trickled into her boot, she laughed it off, but Aiden cleaned the cut with iodine, hands gentle but trembling. She watched him with quiet amusement. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. Just savoring the look on your face, half terror, half tenderness. Like a boy afraid of breaking a seashell he already owns." He tied the bandage too tight, she winced, he loosened it, she smiled, his heart found a new notch of belonging. Letters without postage. They returned to Glenrath on July 21, exhausted yet triumphant, 17 bridges completed, one left, the farthest south, Dunlean span, accessible only by skiff across Loch Marron. The grant deadline loomed 10 days away, but Dunlean's distance meant 3 days lost to travel. Moreover, Mrs. MacLeod greeted them with news: the village postmistress had been by. Aiden's father had wired twice, demanding his August return for an internship at a construction firm, crucial for your future, son. That night Aiden sat on the harbor wall, telegram folded like a bad omen. Isla joined, a blanket over her shoulders. "You should go," she said quietly. He stared at dark water ruffled by moonlight. "And leave work unfinished?" "The report can wait. Your father's expectations may not." "And what of yours?" The words escaped before he measured them. She inhaled. "My expectations are selfish. They keep wishing the world would shrink to the size of this bay so you wouldn't need to leave." He turned to her, eyes raw. "Isla, I..." She placed a finger on his lips. "Hush. Don't make promises tides will wash away. Instead, write." "Write?" "Letters. If you leave sooner, write me each day. That way Dunlean won't be the only unfinished span between us." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a blank postcard he'd bought in Ardnair, an ink sketch of St. Ronan's Leap. With his mechanical pencil he wrote across the back, "Letter 1, I'm still here, because you're here." He tore it from the pad, folded it, and gave it to her. She smiled, tears turning her eyes into fragile glass. She produced a shell from her pocket, tiny, spiral, rose pink, and pressed it into his palm. "Letter 1, she echoed. "Departure map." He stayed 3 more days, long enough to draft his report summary and to accompany Isla on morning errands so mundane they became holy. Fetching mackerel from the pier, restocking her mother's shop with barley, borrowing a kerosene lamp from the lighthouse keeper. Each minute felt weighed in grams of gold. On July 25 at dawn, the southbound bus pulled up in a cough of diesel. Mrs. MacLeod packed him a hamper that could have fed a platoon. Isla stood apart from her mother to hide the tremor in her jaw. Aiden embraced Mrs. MacLeod first. Then he approached Isla. The world narrowed to her freckles, the wind snagging her curls, the taste of unshed rain in the air. "Bridge 18, she murmured, "still waits." "I'll come back for it." "Come back for you," she corrected, then, barely audible, "come back safe." They did not kiss, the public lane felt too exposed. Instead she pressed a folded page into his hand. "Letter 1, from me," she said, and stepped back. The bus door closed between them like a guillotine. Through the dusty window he watched her shrink, ribboned hair flaring in wind, until Glenrath turned a corner and vanished. An ache, physical as a bruise, pooled beneath his ribs. He unfolded her page. She had drawn a compass rose, its north arm shaped like the Glenrath Bridge arch, and written, "Wherever you stand, point this toward the sea and you'll find me." 1,000 miles by post. London reasserted itself with brutal velocity, sirens, sweaty tube tunnels, deadlines. Aidan delivered his preliminary sketches to Professor Caldwell, who nodded curt praise. Yet amid the clamor, his mind remained in Glenrath's hush. Each evening he wrote Isla, postcards, scraps of graph paper, even a ticket stub from the National Gallery annotated, "Saw Turner seascapes, none as wild as ours." Her replies arrived every third day, envelopes perfumed with peat smoke memory. She sketched village gossip, cows escaping fences, the minister slipping on algae at low tide. She enclosed pressed heather, a button from her father's old coat, a tiny vial of Glenrath sand. Shadow at the threshold. On August 12, Aidan's phone rang while he was reviewing bridge stress load equations with Caldwell. It was Mrs. McLeod, voice shaking. "It's Isla. Infection in the leg wound, spread fast. Hospital in Inverness. Doctors say, it's grave." The floor tilted. Caldwell's lips moved. Aidan heard nothing but blood rushing in his ears. He was on a train within 2 hours, Grant report abandoned. Between stations. The overnight Highland service clattered through darkness. Rain lashed windows, each drop felt like fate knocking. Aidan reread Isla's most recent letter, dated August 8, cheerful, no hint of fever. He clutched it so hard the paper creased like an aging face. He imagined the infection traveling her veins the way he'd traced river tributaries on maps, unstoppable blue threads converging on a heart. At 3 a.m. he began a new letter he might never send. "Hold on. I am a flimsy bridge of flesh and will, but I'm coming. Walk it. Inverness." He arrived at dawn, sprinted through drizzle to the hospital. In the intensive ward, antiseptic stung his nostrils. Mrs. McLeod sat slumped outside room 14, rosary slack between fingers. Her grip on his hand told the story before words. Inside, monitors beeped a syncopated dirge. Isla lay pale, curls damp with fever sweat, lips cracked. Antibiotic lines snaked into her arms, a battlefield of bruises. He approached, throat burning. Her eyes fluttered open. Recognition blossomed weakly. "You made the train," she whispered. "Every mile," he answered, voice breaking. She tried a smile. Letter 18. He produced the unfinished Dunlinen sketch from his satchel and unfolded it above her. "We'll finish it together. You'll show me the tide path. Promise." A tear slid from her lash. "I'm trying to stay." He kissed her fingers, those map-making, spoon-baking, shell-collecting fingers. "Then I'll stay beside you. Every second." Red bridge, black tide. But infection is a storm uninterested in poetry. By evening her kidneys faltered. Doctors spoke softly yet relentlessly, the vocabulary of defeat, sepsis, multiple organ failure, hours not days. Aidan refused to leave the bedside. He wrote words on cheap hospital paper and read them aloud in tremulous whispers, the story of each bridge, their secret ribbon colors, the taste of midnight coffee, the promise of seeing Nadrocade where souls meet. Shortly before dawn on August 14, Isla's breathing hitched. She opened her eyes once more. "Aidan, the compass." He placed it, her drawn rose, on her chest. "North," she murmured. The monitors flatlined like distant thunder smoothed into silence. The unfinished span. Glenrath Bay greeted her coffin with Salisbury rainbows. The village carried ribbons to the bridge and tied them in mourning, white for peace, sea blue for solace, one ribbon of every hue she'd ever chosen. Aidan, gaunt with sleeplessness, laid the Dunlinen sketch atop the arch keystone. He remained a week, helping Mrs. McLeod sort Isla's room. In an old biscuit tin he found their packet of letters, his, hers, unsent duplicates. At the bottom lay a journal page titled Things to Build. 1. My own bookshop with tea corner. 2. Aidan's gallery exhibit in Edinburgh. 3. Bridge 18 on the map of our hearts. He traced the list until tears blurred ink into bruise-colored blooms. A geography rewritten. On the day he left, he carried 2 items, the Thistle map folder and Isla's compass rose. At Glenrath Bridge he tied a final ribbon, rose pink, the shade of her shell. He set the compass on the parapet, arrow pointing seaward. Wherever north lies, he whispered, there you are. The tide rose, licked the sandstone, and the ribbon fluttered like a heart still beating. The bridge remained, stone, silent, eternal. Yet Aidan felt a fracture run through its symmetry, a hairline crack only the grieving can see. He walked away, each step a word in the longest letter he would ever write, a story still seeking its final punctuation on the far shore of loss.